if I told you that the best right tackle in the game, a man who routinely outweighs his competition by anywhere from 30 to 70 pounds, is shockingly one of the most passive finesse linemen in the entire league? Typically, offensive line play is all about asserting power and exercising your size advantage, but Lane Johnson, who hasn't allowed a sack since November 22, 2020, doesn't abide by those rules. That's not to say he isn't tough as hell. He tore his adductor Christmas Eve and still didn't allow a sack through the rest of the season. And watching him work on film, we see a masterclass in offensive line play. He has a finesse style because he wants you to hit him first. Typically, offensive linemen want to use their brute strength and overpowering weight advantage to punish smaller, faster pass rushers, but not Lane. For him, he doesn't have to hit you first because he understands the psychology of beating his man. It's not that offensive tackles can't lose at all. You block your guy for 3 seconds and that's all you need. That's a win. It's not that your guy can't move you back at all. That's just not the job. You can give a little ground and then anchor down while still keeping the integrity of the pocket. That is actually what the job is. He accomplishes these by letting the pass rusher hit him first, whether it's a power rusher trying to push him back or a speed rusher trying to beat him around the edge. Lane uses his elite athleticism to stay in front of his man and waits till he punches first, then swallows him up. It is not easy. He starts every play by taking 2 quick steps in order to read out the defender's plan. Usually, offensive tackles take massive kick steps out of their stance to make sure they can choke off the edge. Since they're slower than everybody they go up against, they need to be sure they're getting outside to make up for that gap in speed. But Lane has such incredible speed himself, he's never worried about the edge. He can just adjust if he needs to. From here, he can suss out if Dorrance Armstrong is trying to win with power, where he'll run through him, so Lane can begin to settle his feet and body and prepare to deliver his punch. Or if it's speed, where he's trying to go around him, so Lane can shuffle backwards and adjust. When he identifies its speed, he begins sinking back, which is a huge no-no for most offensive tackles. If Armstrong transitions his speed to power and you're on your heels, there is no way you can maintain your power through your stance to anchor down, but Lane's technique is that good. Armstrong does in fact transition his speed to power, which just means he's going to begin his rush going around the edge to widen Lane, then tries to use power through his body when he's got him off balance. But watch our guy. His feet are so quick he's able to transition from sinking back to formulating his punch in a mere second. He can instantaneously drop his weight into his hips to anchor down and create power, then uses his hug technique to hug the outside of Armstrong's shoulder pads to neutralize his strength, which is the key to his entire strategy. Letting a pass rusher hit your pads first is extremely sketchy for any lineman. All of his 258-pound frame is compacted right into that punch and can easily drive an O-lineman off his feet if not countered in some way. But one of the critical components of Lane's technique is that he uses precise hand placement to attach to the shoulder pads, then lifts upwards to redirect that power from straight ahead to up into the air, and then reabsorbs it into his hips as he sits back and anchors down. He just kind of catches you after you've used your most devastating move, and just saps away all of your power. By staying in front of you at all times with his feet, all you can really do is bull rush him, the main power move, and take what's right in front of you, those open pads, but that's exactly what he wants you to do. Trayvon Walker gets right in there and has the perfect path to just demolishing him backwards, but once Lane gets onto those shoulder pads and lifts up, Walker's strength is completely drained. Lane does this by getting his ankles, knees, and hands in alignment to lift up on Walker's pads, so he's using his entire body to take Walker's horizontal momentum and redirect it vertically to neutralize all that power. That power is really the only thing that can beat him with this move, which is why it's so critical that his body is working in perfect sync. But Lane doesn't just rely on this hug technique alone. He's mastered other little nuances within that technique and other little twists to constantly keep his opponents off balance. By consistently using his footwork to stay in front of him throughout the down, and by not punching first, he limits what they can do. When offensive linemen shoot their hands first to punch, defenders are able to counter with different hand moves to knock him down. But Lane's hands aren't out, so they can't really use those moves. He is so quick you can't beat him with speed, so between no speed moves around the edge, no hand counters because you can't counter what's not there, that really just leaves the power bull rush, which is exactly what he wants and expects you to do. But to take on a full bull rush every time isn't feasible, you will wear down throughout the game, so he has some of these little tricks to take some of the heat off that pitch. He uses a ghost technique to flash his hands and show Micah Parsons he's faking that punch, which alerts Parsons it's time for him to punch so he doesn't get Lane's hands in his pads and nullify his rush. So he starts a little bit earlier than he would have and doesn't have the same power throughout his move. Watch how Lane flashes the ghost and then sinks back an extra step. He's creating distance away from the bull rush to make it weaker and less effective, and is also gathering his power within his base to create a stronger punch. When he uses the ghost, it's really a timing mechanism for him where he's anticipating impact a split second later, so it's boom, ghost, gather and load power into the body, then lock it down. Another little curveball he throws at him is just occasionally mixing it up to come and get you first. This is super rare that he does this, where he uses a jump technique to get on you immediately, which throws off the timing of what the pass rusher is doing not only on this down, but also on future downs, knowing he's usually much more passive. Pass rushers see all of this on film, they know they have to set out to attack his primary technique of not hitting you first, then they'll get the hug technique. So guys try to freeze him in place by showing power, then countering outside with hands, where the psychology behind this is to run directly at him and get him to shoot his hands so he's frozen in place, because when you shoot your hands you have to stop your feet. Then you counter his hands when he shoots them out of desperation, but Lane, as I said, has perfected his technique to the nth degree, and literally will never shoot his hands when he doesn't need to. DeMarcus Lawrence tries to counter those hands he thinks will be there, but they're just not, and Lane just watches him make his move, then punishes him for showing his cards too early. You can see him take his 2 steps to read Lawrence, sees the power is coming so he gears up for the rush, but he isn't fooled, stays active on his feet, and then once he's in Lawrence's pads, it's over. This is another good example of messing with the timing of Lawrence's rush, where D-Law is showing him power, racing right towards him, but instead of repeating what he just did, Lane sinks back even deeper. Still, it's not as if this hug technique works every time. Lane has multiple answers for the rare instances it doesn't work perfectly that he can always execute flawlessly. When the 6'6", 280-pound Carlos Dunlap gives him a no-frills, me-versus-you bull rush dead on, and Lane gets caught a little off balance by not perfectly executing his sink and punch, his pads are wide open for business, and Dunlap is a monster. Having this lack of a base on this level of bull rush blows anybody off their ass. But watch how Lane drops his hips and pivots him to the side. The swivel of his hips absorbs a lot of the blow, so that all of Dunlap's power isn't necessarily neutralized, just redirected, and then Lane gets back to his shoulder pads, and it's over. Another answer is his ability to re-anchor, where when he gets his arms forklifted, which is when the end is able to time his punch when he shoots first, grabs his wrist and raises them into the air, which completely throws off any other tackle's balance, he can still win the rep. His balance with his hips are so elite, it almost looks like he's expecting this to happen, which really, he's not. And to stagger his feet to absorb the oncoming blow helps him redirect his energy back into the ground and locks out Trayvon Walker. One issue that he deals with, which isn't directly related to today's topic, is how he handles stunts from the inside. The NFL has become an athletic freak defensive line league where guys are faster and quicker than they've ever been, so D-lines have widened out their players to put the fast, speedy guys in more space against the slow, fat guys. Whenever a defensive tackle is outside of the midline of the guard, Lane is always on high alert. It could either be an ET stunt, with the end spiking inside and the tackle looping out, or a TE stunt, which is the opposite, and what Lane is more worried about since he's already focused on the D-end on every snap. The moment he sees Frank Clark flash inside, he immediately switches his eyes to the tackle, and his hips absorb all the power to neutralize everything. Defenses know his alarm bells go off when he gets that wide 3 technique, or wider, so good defensive ends like Lawrence will fake the TE stunt by pretending to dive inside to get Lane to overcommit inside. But he's seen it all, and his footwork, balance, athleticism, and technique are just overwhelming even against elite pass rushers. The only time I saw him struggle was with kind of freaky type guys like Frank Clark, who's just a bowling ball of arms and legs. His body is so lanky and shifty, it's hard to tell what he's trying to do at any given second, which kind of made Lane guess a bit more. And look, he didn't give up a pressure in the Super Bowl at all, but Frank gave him a little trouble. The wily vet Jerry Hughes did too, where once again Lane's getting a move that's kind of abnormal and isn't at all typical, but hard to replicate consistently, where Hughes starts with speed outside, goes speed to power, then takes this weird, inefficient gather step, and you can see Lane get kind of confused. Still, no sacks allowed at all literally in years, just 11 pressures this past season according to PFF. He is a premier offensive line talent with a skill set and approach that are surprising to say the least. Never would you think one of the best linemen in the league plays basically like a beta, but by doing so limits how you can attack him and completely saps away your strength while frustrating you to no end. He understands his job better than most. It's not about punishing the opposition, just keeping them away from your quarterback. Will there be more who copy him and don't hit the pass rusher first? Sure. But nobody else will ever do it this well, because nobody else is Lane Johnson.